everybody. It is a beautiful day here in New York City, and I hope it's a beautiful day where you are too. I know we can all use as much sunshine as we can get these days. So, thank you so much for sharing your early evening or afternoon, wherever you're streaming in from, with us here at Samoa Live. I am Erica Rand Silverman, and I am a literary agent at Samoa Literary Studio. And for those of you who don't know me, we've been doing Samoa Live since the very start of the pandemic, and it has become such a joy in my life and in my colleagues and industry friends who join us here, as well as the wonderful feedback we've gotten from all of you that though we luckily now leave our homes a lot more often, some of us, we still are doing it. And so today we are talking about probably my absolute favorite aspect of children's publishing, and that is picture book read alouds. And I considered sitting here reading aloud a picture book to you because that's really what I love to do. But I know our time is limited and you're not here to see me. You're here to see these wonderful people who are joining us. So I'm not going to do that today, but maybe I will do it soon. If you haven't already, before we begin, I would like to ask you to please subscribe to the Samoa Live channel below. And if you have not already registered for our newsletter, you can do that on samoalive.com. And that way you won't miss an event. So I am bringing in Susannah Richards, who will be our moderator today. Susannah is an associate professor of education at Eastern Connecticut State University, where she teaches English language arts and children's and young adult literature. She also has a PhD in the educational psychology and gifted education. She's a member of multiple award committees throughout the years. She has an infectious energy and passion for children's books, and I just feel really lucky every time she's willing to join us because she is able to place our conversations within a larger, highly informed context of the industry. We can all learn so much from her. So I'm going to bring her in and thank her so much.
Well, Erica, thank you for that lovely and extraordinary introduction, which I'm sure had a little bit of hyperbole in it.
I know it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Really, I'm excited to be here. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here is because rarely do we have the chance to look at a topic from multiple perspectives. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have the team that we have today. Couple people that I know, or one person that I know a little bit, and two people that I don't know at all. So I'm looking forward to it. So I am so excited that we're going to be able to talk with an author illustrator who has two amazing books out there. We're going to bring on Rebecca Jordan-Glum, who is created these absolutely amazing kind of effervescent and thoughtful read alouds that I'm super excited about. We have her most recent book, Kitty, with us, and we're going to bring her on, and then we're going to get to bring on her editor, which is super excited. So this is Rebecca, and I love how her background goes with her book jacket. Like, she's incredibly well coordinated. So Rebecca, that's like one of the things that I really believe in. You dress and you like coordinate your background for the read aloud. So we'll talk a little bit about setting the stage. But I'm also delighted that we have the editor of this book. We have Emily Feinberg, who I've known for a little while. I don't know her well, but we definitely would know each other on the street should we run into each other. And we've had the opportunity to have some meals and other things like together, but I'm delighted that we have an editor. Emily is an editor at Roaring Brook Press, an imprint of Macmillan Children's Book Publishing, and we're delighted. And she works on a ton of projects. I will admit, anytime Emily is working on a project, when that book comes into my house, I'm like, oh, this is an Emily book. I really want to look at that, and I want to give it the time and attention it needs.
Oh my gosh, that means so much to me.
And I'm also delighted that not only do we have an author illustrator and an editor, but we also have a children's bookseller from one of the oldest bookstores in the country, contiguously owned by the same family for 126 years. I guess we're going into it. Was recently celebrated its 125th birthday, and we have Sonia Teder-Moore here from Warwick Books, and we're absolutely delighted that she's here to talk a little bit about the role of the read aloud and what it looks like from a book selling perspective. So I'm super delighted to have you all here. I'm going to set the stage a little bit. And I'm also going to tell you guys how the groundwork rules work for a Susannah moderated panel.
Oh, okay. And before you do, I'm going to give it to you. So I'm going to step out because then you'll all be bigger on the screen, which I'm a big fan of.
Kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah. So let me just say before I go, Sonia, thank you so much for joining us, and Emily, thank you so much for joining us as well. Of course, Rebecca. I am going to put in the chat a link to Warwick's bookstore, which is such an amazing indie that when the lease came up, it's like a romance movie for book lovers. When the lease came up and it was so expensive and that the family didn't know if they could actually keep it going, people in the community bought the actual building that the bookstore is in just so that they could forever guarantee that Warwick's would have a home there. I mean, this is the kind of indie that you want to support. So if you are so moved to buy any of the books talked about today, especially Kitty or The Trouble with Penguins, they are at Warwick's bookstore and they have signed copies. So I'm going to put links to them in the chat, and they're also linked in the event page, as is Warwick. So we hope that you'll support them. I'll be on the back end, and thank you all for being here.
We love you, Erica. So I'm totally excited about that. And I just want to remind you that every time you support an independent bookstore, you are helping make the world literate in another way. And so books make great presents. Signed books make even better presents. And my understanding is Rebecca has signed some copies of Kitty that are available at Warwick. So you can always do that. And they do this thing, they mail books to you if you order them from them. So it's super, super exciting. It's super exciting. And Sonia, is Warwick's on bookshop.org as well for those people? Okay, for those people who might not be aware, the bookshop.org platform kind of extended its reach during COVID, and it is a platform that permits you to buy from independent bookstores around the country, actually. And it also is a great place to see what the bookstores are that might be in an area that you're visiting. So totally exciting and whatever. But we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the read aloud. And there are a lot of misconceptions about the read aloud. As a professor, I'm constantly talking about the ways that a read aloud is important because it is so incredibly important. In fact, it is foundational to literacy. Do you know that kids get a huge percentage of their vocabulary from read alouds? In fact, the wider variety of the read alouds in your home, whether it's the dictionary or fabulous, recently published picture books, or maybe older classics like Jacqueline Woodson and Hudson Talbot's book, which is currently a play at the Kennedy Center, just FYI if you missed that. But whether these read alouds play such a good role in expanding vocabulary. They're also great for stories, understanding how story works, information. You know, you can find so many different things like A is for axolotl, literally alphabet books that are absolutely positively and amazing. The truth of the matter is that every study that's ever been done on a read aloud shows that it is a core piece of literacy development. And it's even better than dinner conversation because you get a wider variety of vocabulary and sentence structure. So we are all for the read aloud, whether it's a picture book read aloud, a graphic novel read aloud, an informational read aloud, a novel and verse read aloud, a young adult novel, or maybe it's an adult book that you want to share with a multi-generational audience. So we're super, super excited about that. Many of you know that the average picture book, that's actually not the average, but the standard size picture book is 32 pages. So 32 pages is kind of ideal for somebody's attention because the amount of number of words that can be on that read aloud can vary quite a bit. So we have books that are perfect for the really young child who may really literally need a 5-minute read aloud, or maybe it's a 3-minute read aloud. Or the older child who may be ready for a more in-depth read aloud, like those, like some of the picture book biographies that we're seeing more and more of. So we're super excited about that. So now we're going to start into some of the nitty gritty about the role of the read alouds and how you see the read aloud. So I'm going to ask our panelists a question, and that is, why picture books and why read aloud? When you think about this topic, from your perspective, what is the greatest value, or as I like to say, added value to reading aloud, in particular, a picture book, even though we know we can read lots of other things? Anybody want to go first?
Well, I can jump right in. I'll jump
right,
right
so you go for it.
When I'm talking to parents and people who come into the store about reading aloud, is that anybody can read aloud a book and share it. And the added value is you're creating an experience in that moment. So just as when you go see a play, the audience is such a big part of that play, it changes it, versus a movie where the screen is you can't permeate it. You are part of the experience. So when you're sharing a book aloud, it adds a whole layer of meaning to it. The person who is delivering it, who's sharing it by reading and adding the sounds, and then the person who is listening is having an experience because it's being shared with them. So I think that is something that I always try to tell parents. And I also try to say, just do it. A lot of parents and people come in and say, oh, I don't know, maybe someone in the family will read it to them. And I said, how about you? How about you? Just jump in and enjoy it. So I'll just jump right in with that I think reading aloud is a very different kind of thing than reading to yourself.
And that's so important. It's the socialization of reading. And Sonia, would you do me a favor? Go back to that picture book that you just held up, which is
one of my favorites.
Recently. So go the other way. Room for Everyone. This is an amazing example of a perfect picture book for everyone. It's an experience. It has my favorite kind of vehicle in it, one that seats 12 people. It is to me, it's a little bit of a combination of, how many people can we fit in a VW bug, as well as community and other things like that. I think it's so super important. And I love like the potential there. And I love how you talked about literally that social and emotional aspect of the read aloud, which is the connections and the extension. Rebecca and Emily, do you have anything you want to say about why the read aloud?
Well, I'll say something. I had never read my first book out loud when it came out. It was during the pandemic. I had a problem, which actually most people don't know, in that the voice in my head when I wrote it was like this old, wise British woman.
I remember you telling me this.
And so I couldn't read it because it wasn't my voice. And I was like panicked. I was like, oh my God, I can't read this. And so when I heard Sonia read it online, because I had the advantage of, I heard like 50 readings of it because of the pandemic. All these libraries were posting a reading. And I think you don't normally get to hear all these different people read something you've created. And so I really saw what worked, what kind of worked, what worked amazing, and how each person was interpreting it in their completely own way and using their voice to emphasize things and point things out. And it was really exciting to me because I hadn't had that experience in making it. I had that experience with my own children, but not with my own book.
And I think that's so much fun with The Trouble with Penguins in the different ways. It's so interesting to hear you talk about what you thought the voice was. And as I was practicing reading it earlier today, one of the things I was thinking about is how much prosody, which is just a fancy word for expression, that I can use, or the pacing, or the wait time. And I think what's so incredibly exceptional about your two books, Rebecca, is that so much of the value in them is in that wait time, that you have paced between the illustrations and the text, and your team, which
I was going to say Emily has paced,
editor, art director, marketing, and other things. There's just such a good pacing of it. And I have not had a chance to read it with young people yet, but I am absolutely dying to have a group of kids in that chair and a half moment with this, because I'm just going to wait and see what happens. Wait and see what happens. So Emily, talk a little bit about, you've had to work on a lot of different books during your career in particular, and talk a little bit about what you see is sort of the ideal read aloud, and how you read aloud as you're acquiring manuscripts and other things.
Yeah. So before we started talking, I was saying to Susannah, one of my big tools is reading aloud. It's just my voice. And every picture book I work on, I could probably recite for all of you, just like name a title that I edited, and like I've read it that many times that I can just recite it back to you. But what it does is it really helps me see the pacing, like we were just talking about. It really helps me just hear it. And for me, I think, it's funny, when I'm acquiring books, I'm not going to agents saying I need a really good read aloud. But if the book doesn't read aloud, I read aloud well, then I feel like it's not in the right place to be published. Like there has to be, especially for this young audience, a really sort of engaging, and I'm okay with a little bit challenging, but comforting read aloud with picture books. Because for me, I always think back to, like, this is so cliche, but just as a kid, those were some of my favorite moments with my mom, was, her tucking me into bed and reading like Ferdinand, reading Where the Wild Things Are, those big books in the early 90s.
You're so young.
And I still think about that, because as I'm sort of working on a book and working with an author, you can tell when the pacing is off, when you're reading something and you get kind of stumped. And for me, that's the sort of exciting bit of the puzzle for every picture book, is kind of making sure all of those elements, the page turns, the read alouds, the vocab, everything kind of work organically with each other. So it doesn't feel like they're all a piece.
There's so much to unpack in everything everybody's saying, but Erica's only going to let us be on for about an hour. So I'm going to try to move it along. But I think it's really important to recognize that the reader has the potential to make almost anything work as a read aloud. I've thought about this a lot, and I often teach the teachers and people that I'm working with that I can make the dictionary work as a read aloud if I have to. It's really about what I bring to it. And we often talk about in the industry, but I don't think we always share publicly, this triangular connection with the read aloud, that it is about the text and the illustrations, the book itself, the physical object. It is about the person who is delivering the physical object in the story, but it is also about what the listener, or who might also be a reader, he, she, or they might be that as well, but what the listener takes. And it's that triangulation of explosion. Today, it's Tuesday, and most of us know that Tuesdays are pub days and other things. And Nina Cruz's new I'm Not Small just published today. This is published by Green Willow, and I've already posted it on my Instagram, by the way. Testing out books and other things on Instagram and Twitter. And we'll talk about all those things. But one of the things that I've already enjoyed about reading this aloud is that it is so reminiscent of a Margaret Weiss Brown in a Here and Now book, but it is so different than Rebecca's book, Kitty. But yet I love reading both of them aloud. And you know why? Because they have RESPECT. They respect the story and they respect the reader or the listener. And so if you could only have one or two qualities that you wanted in a read aloud, what would those be? What would those be? And maybe they go with Princessa and the Pea. So.
Well, I have in front of me my favorite read aloud. It's picture book. My favorite not picture book is My Family and Other Animals. Oh my gosh. It is so fun to read out loud. Oh, love it, love it, love it. But my favorite picture book.
Oh my God,
read it aloud.
I almost put Amy's book in the pile, and then I thought,
This is so fun. The mama voice, the papa voice. You're like, oh, it's brilliant. And you can hear it in your head the second you pick it up. You don't have to even read it ahead. You can start reading for the first time and understand the characters and the voices and stuff. At least to me.
Can I ask a question, Susannah?
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like it's important to have read aloud books have dialogue in them, or is that not an imperative?
Yes and no. For me, it is. If it works, it works. If it's needed, great. But if it's not there, I don't miss it.
We get a lot of great books, especially on a Tuesday when the drop day in the store. And the ones that I'm looking for a read aloud when I'm selecting it for our reading aloud segment is that it has to have, I'm looking for chewy words also. So I like, for example, this is one that we read recently, The Runaway Pea.
Oh my God, may I make a big shout out for summer reading, for a fun family read for everybody, for The Runaway Pea?
Yeah, so good, because it has a lot of onomatopoeia. There's lots of things that you can use and feel in your mouth, and then the person listening is that much more engaged. So that to me, it's already jumping off the page and ready for me to read. Or it has a story, like one of this classic extra yarn, which has something that's going to have a lot of possibilities for anticipation and prediction, so that your reader is already interested and engaged because those things are happening in their brain. So they're bringing that to the story, your listener. And it also then has a lot of, besides just incredible artwork, it has to have that backdrop that just allows you to live in this world. So something like this that has a lot to talk about also, and can lead to doing things with yarn. So I'm looking for something that's going to have all those kinds of possibilities in a story.
I love what you said about the chewy and the anticipation part. And I think when I first read Kitty, and I was lucky enough, to look at it a little bit early, but then have my bound copy. I was so excited about sort of what the listener might notice, but wasn't in the text, and the little bit of the tension, and the fact that it was funny to me at 57, but it was also funny and inviting to a 3-year-old. And then I have kind of a semi-crabby 11-year-old that I read it to. And I do love him dearly, but he's a little bit crabby. And he was like, I get it. That's clever. That's clever, and other things like that. The whole, and then I kept going back. Speaking of like the words and other things, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this is my 21st century Amelia Bedelia without being an Amelia Bedelia book.
That was my favorite series. I had every book. Actually, I've got like 40 of them up in my studio here. That was absolutely my ultimate childhood book. And I didn't outgrow them. Right?
Like me neither. That anniversary Amelia Bedelia, where they had the history of Amelia Bedelia and how she's changed over time. I'm not kidding. I have 5 copies of it, and I'm not even willing to give anybody one of them. So, as we look at it and as we think, this is something I think we don't think about a lot. I ask my students all the time, where does the read aloud start? And they'll like open to the first page, they'll skip the end pages, and they'll skip the full title page. And I'm like, here's a trick. I think we all know that the read aloud starts right here, right? I'm like right here. This kitty, our faux kitty, our hijacked kitty, and other things. It starts right here, but it doesn't necessarily start with what do you think this book is about? Do you know that the research on what do you think this book is about? Bad. It actually more misaligns than it does. So just like just what do you see? Or is there anything that grabs your attention? This, of course, is an old Pura Belpré award winner, La Princesas in the Pea, written by Susan Middleton Elliott and illustrated by Caldecott and Pura Belpré award-winning Juana Martinez Neal. But it's just so kind of amazing when you get this book where you want to turn the page. So let's talk about the page turn, people. This is serious context in our world.
Love talking about page turns.
Page turn. A number of people have referred to the page turn as like moving from one scene to another in a movie, an actor, other things like that. But man, that page turn can do so many things, like it does in Christopher Denise's Night Owl.
I love that one.
Which is just like so amazing. I mean, just looking at this. Or, of course, I don't want to plug Rebecca too much here, but the page turns in here are kind of brilliantly paced and other things. So why is the page turn so incredibly cinematic and so important in the picture book? Anybody?
Well, I always think about, it's one of those things where like you're watching a movie and you're like, oh my God, that was the best movie I've ever seen. And the movie is that good, because those, people got together and were like, where are these moments of breaks? Where are we going? How do we lead from one place to another? How do we kind of connect all of these scenes so that they all feel connected to each other rather than just to the scenes next to them? And I think that in picture books, it's the same sort of element. It's a major, if not the most important part of the storytelling. And one of my favorite things I love to talk about and could probably talk forever about is sort of how I always think of picture books as like, I'm a huge sitcom fan. I love sitcoms. If I wasn't in publishing, I'd be like desperately trying to make it into being like a TV showrunner or something. But and I think I've talked to Rebecca about this, that those episodes are 30 minutes long. You have to get an entire arc, emotional resonance, like character development, all of that in like teeny tiny. And picture books are 32 pages long. And it's the same thing. You have to tell a story with like full scope, even if it is a sort of slice of life story. The emotions need to be a full scope. And really, like, our biggest tool to make that as effective as possible are page turns, which is why I think they're so fun.
I think that's so great. And we think about like the resonance. Somebody mentioned Where the Wild Things Are earlier. Of course, we see, Maurice Sendak's use of the page turn in Where the Wild Things Are, or in The Night Kitchen, or just in an ode to the old Flatiron building where Emily used to get to work, an ode to Bill Steig, who used to illustrate in the Flatiron building, and Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, or Abel's Island, which is a slightly longer text, not really a picture book, but or Dr. DeSoto. So it is that whole capturing. Sonia, you look like you're dying to say something, and I want you to say.
I just think the page turn is such a dramatic vehicle, and it's so when you're reading aloud, it's either one where you get a whole new thought, or sometimes you have that wonderful like bleed over moment where you're pulling your energy to the next page, which I just love. And I was just sharing this one, or you have a moment like in this book, Talk Like a River, which was one of my all-time favorites during the pandemic, where you have a page turn that opens into this moment.
Look at that gatefold, people. It's a double gatefold.
I'm always jealous of those.
Double gatefold. Whoa!
It's this moment when this opened, every single person I read this book with, there was a gasp. And then you have this moment where you're all just living in that place for a second, and just no words are being said. That's the moment of quiet in the book to just absorb it, all created by the fact that you had that page turn.
Will you do me a favor, Sonia? I want you to go back and hold it sort of in the center of the screen and go back to that double gatefold where the eyes are looking at you and inviting you.
Oh, it's just
like,
look at it.
Just like strategically open, like open me up, baby.
I know. And then it goes like this.
Brilliant. That Sendak used when literally the wild things, we fell into the wild rumpus as the picture started to bleed off the page. And this actually reminds me of a book that I know Emily edited by Elijah Cooper, which is my copy is like somewhere within my reach and I can't reach it. Don't tell Elijah. But yes and no.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That absolutely amazing yes and no. This book that started with an ampersand just because he wanted to write a book with an ampersand. I think that's
what are you telling people?
I think that's an Elijah truth.
I can't control Elisha.
But
so we have
amazing.
This is the book that I really, really wanted to talk about besides Kitty, in terms of the read aloud, because it's so funny. My best friend is also a children's book editor, and she has a son who is 5, and he's obsessed with yes and no. And it's because he loves the read aloud, and it's because you get to do all of these crazy voices where, this puppy and this cat want to go outside, and the puppy is all yes everywhere, and the cat is like, no thanks, every once in a while. But like, he loves this page where you just get to like say all the different kinds of yeses. But this was my favorite page turn, where he's just going chaotic, like he's getting crazy, he's having the zoomies, and then you turn the page and it's just enough. and it just stops you. And that we worked really hard on that, and I think it works really nicely. But I always think about this book when I think about read alouds that like surprised me, I guess, because I don't have any children, and when I work on picture books, I certainly don't you like ask children to read them. Like it's such a weird removed process. So it's always really nice when you hear like a 5-year-old is really into a read aloud for whatever reason.
I always think we need more control groups in children's publishing before books get published, before pub date, you know, because you learn so much about what they react to and other things like that. And thinking about that page turn, and the page turn can be so incredibly different. In Ali's I never know how to say his last name. So if somebody wants to correct me, because I've only seen it in print, Baharampur's book, Pig in the Palace, you know, literally the page turn, and we go from these kind of semi-structured images and scenes to like all over things. And I just think about how that can play such a big role, and that pacing, and how a child sometimes determines the pacing, because he, she, or they will like tell you to turn they're like, I'm ready now. Yeah. I'm ready for the next stage. And it's so important to read and think about that. Rebecca, I want you to talk a little bit about where ideas come from, because I think we can't separate the read aloud from this concept of where ideas come from. And both of your books have this level of snarkiness that I absolutely love. Like, I know that as a younger person growing up in Brooklyn, I would have loved both of your books as a little child, because there's something in them, in both Penguins and Kitty, that I just am like, there's a little bit of devil in.
I was gonna say Rebecca's a little devious.
You can tell that. You can just tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually was not easy for me or my teachers. Let me just put that out there. I was not like the fan favorite of the teachers, but they were like, oh my gosh, what do we do with this child? But so you're wondering where these ideas are coming from. So I wonder this too. So, and the reason I say that is we were driving the other day with my kids and my husband, and I saw a horse trailer that was being towed. And this one was a fancy one, and had all these little like window doors that you would open. And it looked to me like a food truck. And instantly it was a food truck. There were horses in there serving food. And like, it was this whole thing. And I started telling this to my kids and my husband, and they were like, I don't think that's what a horse food truck is. Like, and I was like, okay, but I didn't intentionally see that. Right. So I looked at it and it just came to me. And the only thing I could think of is I have read thousands and thousands and thousands of books, because that was my like favorite thing as a child growing up. You know, my parents are readers. We can't not have a book in our hand. And so that's the only thing I can think of, is that every time I read a book, all those ideas went into my head, and now they kind of just combine in random ways, and ways that amuse me. And you know, it's the undefinable thing. Like, how did I come up with it? I don't know. I'm never trying, actually. I'm kind of chasing these ideas.
So I just want to prepare you, Rebecca. I want you to think about this. We've had a request in the chat, and we probably would have done this anyway. I think we will want to read at least part of Kitty out loud. So okay. I want you to think about how you might want to set the stage, and where might be that moment that we want to hear in the sound of your voice. Richard Peck once wrote a poem for Penguin Random House about 25 years ago, and he said, let them hear it in the sound of your voice. Gifted non-readers, you have the choice, but let them hear it in the sound of your voice. And I think it's so incredible. I also want to remind you that you don't have to be an extravagant or an outrageous person who reads aloud. I am the person who will give out candy at Halloween, but never dressed up. I am the person who would be behind the curtain and on the stage giving a serious lecture or introducing somebody, but no way will I take on another persona. And yet I've heard, rumors said, that my read alouds are actually not that painful. And so it's really about what you have and what you want to bring to the text. It's also about both reading the text and reading the room and just having a little bit of fun. And if you want to practice your read aloud skills, I'm going to recommend one of my favorite series of books. That's an older series written by National Book Award winning poet Marion Hoberman and illustrated by Michael Emberley. These are books published by Little Brown. There's a whole series of them. You read to me, I'll read to you. Very short stories to read together, very short fairy tales to read together, very short Aesop's tables, very short scary stories. You get the idea. And whether you have the blue one, the white one, the yellow one, the black one, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But these books are really ideal for helping you and others improve your read aloud skills, because they are literally short in-verse poems from two perspective where you can just have a little bit of fun. I found a dime. You found a dime. I'm finding money all the time. I lost a dime. You lost a dime? I lost my dime at dinner time. I found my dime when I was walking down the block at 5 o'clock, as they figure out that the dime is probably the same dime and other things like that. So there are lots of ways that we can figure out and find our read aloud voice. There are lots of reasons we should read aloud. There are lots of ways that and opportunities to read aloud. And so one of the things that I was going to start off with, and I was hoping that each of you would share, is like, when is the time that you love to read aloud? So like, I can't read in the car. Vomit will come everywhere. So, but I can read aloud on the subway. Been known to literally gather a subway car together on a New York City subway. I can read aloud on the ground. I can read aloud at a soccer game, you name it. So I think that the read aloud is a dinner event or during snack time. It's a transitional period, but when do you like to read aloud? And Sonia, I wanted you to talk about your favorite ways to do read alouds in the store.
Well, actually, we're not doing read alouds in the store again yet because of the still the restrictions.
You will.
We recently had a big event and we did a read aloud outside the front of the store, which was great. The store doesn't have a great space. So actually doing it online through our Instagram, which we're able to do every day during the pandemic, which was really fantastic. We're down to once a week and now not even once a week. So every couple weeks. The best time for a read aloud I will read aloud anytime. So that's the best time. But for me, it's there's different kinds of read alouds. A read aloud at bedtime is awesome, but it has a very different purpose. It's for the purpose of lulling, transitioning into that peaceful state. So you want to do a favorite. You want to do a favorite that's just like water through your brain. Like what you were just saying, where you have it memorized. You've read it so many times. I'm thinking, Whose Mouse Are You, that I read to my daughter probably 5,300,000, like just so many times that I could just recite it because it's so comforting and puts you in a great spot. For a read aloud that I want to have more engaged, I agree. It should be at a time when it's a good time for attention. People aren't too wiggly. They're not ready to jump out and do other things. So for us, after dinner is a good time when everyone's kind of settled down and their tummies are full of food. So usually we do an evening read aloud that's prior to bedtime. Even still do that now. So we have a tradition of, at the holidays, we bring out all of the holiday books that live in a special box. There's over 100 of them, and they come out at the holidays. And every evening we sit down after dinner with tea, sometimes cookies, and we do read aloud where we all take turns reading our favorites. So I think that's the best time for read aloud, when you can create that pleasure and enjoy and take some time.
I love that. You remind me of a family that I've known for years, and they would always read aloud would always happen after everyone had been eaten and they were cleaning up, and somebody would be doing the dishes and somebody would be sitting at the table reading aloud. And it might have been The Whittlebees by Lois Lowry, which was one of my favorites for a read aloud like that, or it might have been a picture book or other things like that. And as these boys, all of whom are well past college now and living around the world and other things, they still come back and think and ask about certain read alouds, which occupy a special shelf in their case, in their home. But Rebecca or Emily, what do you like? What is your idea? Emily, you've confessed that we could come to your office and might be hearing you read aloud, or maybe at home, and in this virtual life and other things like that. What did your read aloud time like? Like, do you like to read in the morning? Like, do you like to read piles of picture books before breakfast, or on the treadmill, or what?
I wish I wish I was a morning person to do anything before breakfast. I I will be honest, my read aloud time lately has been purely utilitarian, because we are very swamped right now. So there isn't a lot of free time to go and like read aloud to each other. But one thing that I do this with my assistant and my colleague Kate. We often we have a little book club, and we'll read to each other picture books that we've come across that we really like. And the last one I think I read to them was Melfell, because I thought that was such a fun read aloud to read, because you have the page turn, the book turn, everything. It's very interactive. But yeah, I'm sad to say that most of it is work related these days. Although I sometimes read to my 1-year-old puppy when I hold her hostage.
You know what? That actually brings up a really good point, and that is the animal read aloud.
Mm-hmm.
And so often we can model the modeling that we do as adults. A child might want to share with one of their favorite creatures live, or possibly a stuffy or a lovey as well.
Yeah,
and
actually,
that's so important.
I did a book several years ago now called Hello Goodbye Dog.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one, Susannah?
I do.
And it's this really great, it's a great read aloud in and of itself, but it is about kids reading, kind of gaining confidence in a classroom with a reading dog, who's not really a reading dog. She's really the escaped pet of one of the classroom kids, but ultimately earns her license to let kids read to her. But it's this really nice, and it kind of just talks about, and if you look at the back, the author's note of that book, it's connected to a library in Whittier, California, Rebecca, where we have real pictures in the back of the book of their reading dog program, where these dogs talk to the kids. And it just I love that book so much, because one, I love dogs, but two, it really is it gives you all these ideas, and you're like, oh, I can use this. I can and dogs love it because they're getting attention. Their person is talking to them in one spot. Although if you have a puppy, I would wait for them to be a little sleepy. Try to steal the book.
I think there's so much, just because I know we're running out of time, and I do want to have some time for Rebecca. I also want to really talk a little bit about what people are talking about all over the world, and even in Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court hearings and nominations, which is the idea of the social emotional learning read. And that I have a phrase that I've used for years, which is, the book is not the destination, it's the stimulus to the destination unknown. And books like Mike Corrado's Being a Bear, or Jane Yolen and Heidi E. Weiss Stempel's I Am the Storm, or any picture book Jacqueline Woodson has written. The Other Side, of course, being one of her, I think wasn't that her first picture book? Or Tomatoes for Neela. This whole idea that you cannot think of the picture book as the destination. It's really the vehicle to the destination unknown, and it can take you anywhere. And 50 years later, you can find yourself as a children's book editor, or a story maker, or a sitcom writer, or all kinds of other things. And I think that's super important. But because I don't want to run out of time, and I can always fill the time in after Rebecca, do you want to hold up and read a section from Kitty?
Sure, absolutely.
Also hold it up as well. We've got in the chat going, by the way, we've got some really good titles. We've got Unstoppable, and The Book Just Ate My Dog. So we've got a little meta in there, and other things. But Rebecca, let's share a little bit about Kitty, which I just, we do like those case covers, and I just love the subtle difference between the case cover and.
Can you find it? Can you find the difference?
Yes. Can you?
It's a whole nother thing.
Okay. So, okay, Rebecca, are you on? You ready?
Yes. I'd like to start at the beginning because I think the setup for this thing is great. Okay.
Are you going to do you want to hold it up so that everyone can see the pictures?
Sure. Or should I read it and you'll hold it up?
Okay, let me just
collaboration.
Where I need to be in my camera. There we go. I think I'm good. So I'll try to keep up with you.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, so Kitty by Rebecca Jordan-Glum. Don't worry about a thing, Granny said. The cat will be just fine. Everything Granny needed to know was written on a note taped to the fridge. How convenient, thought Granny. When, all of a sudden, something frightened the cat, which gave Granny quite a start. The cat leapt one way, Granny's glasses flew the other, and the note fluttered to the floor. Oh dear, exclaimed Granny, the ink is smudged. She was relieved that she could still read the words. Please don't let the cat out. Well, that shouldn't be a problem, thought Granny. But when she looked up, she saw that the cat had already escaped. So she grabbed the cat food and coaxed it back inside. My, what a big appetite you have, Granny remarked. I'm feeling a bit peckish myself. Time to make cupcakes, Granny said. Kitty thought so too. And maybe, should I keep going?
So we've got a lot of good things going on, and I'm not doing a great job, but I do want to bring up a couple of points. And I think it's super fun to look at how some of these are full-page bleeding spreads and how some of them are on the verso and the recto. I'm a believer that we should always use the publishing terms when we're talking about images and other things like that. But I also think it's really important for us to think about when we're reading aloud, how do we make sure that the audience can see? I am on a camera, so if I were in a room, it would be a little bit better because I could push out and remove and other things like that. But it's such a basic little thing, but I often talk to readers about how, you should be able to do your Vanna White. Your Vanna White is, how are you going to highlight all the different images of this, and how are you going to make it so accessible? So we can hear already in the beginning of the story that there is a little bit of a perception issue here going on. that we have a visitor who might be a little bit mischievous and is going to be able to have a little bit of fun. So this is such a good book to connect to older backlist titles where there's a little bit of mischief and whatever, but it's also great for point of view and mischief. And I'm personally just kind of like, literally, I love the way you're ending, because I think what you do with the ending is so different than what we've seen in other ways. Although I do have to admit that it harkens a little bit back to the original Cat in the Hat, where like at the end everything was put back together.
She's like walking up the walk, like running around.
I missed that, but we do have cart, and I do love Granny's position when she's driving in the car. I mean, like, lots of love about that, And
I think, like one of my absolute favorite things about this book, Kitty, is the way I sort of describe it in house when I have to talk about it is I'm like, there's no moral here. Like, this is just like madcap chaos. That's what this book is. Like, no one learns a lesson. This could very well happen again. And it's nice. It felt really refreshing to me. Because when we look at, our first book that we did together, The Trouble with Penguins, that one, it felt like we needed to come to, it sort of felt naturally like there needed to be some kind of lesson or some kind of voice at the end saying, look at what happened. But I like that Kitty just goes the complete opposite way.
Yeah, totally.
No,
I have a request.
Sure.
I don't know if Sonia has Kitty.
I was just looking around for it. I brought a stack of books from the store and I don't have my copy of Kitty.
Yes, I was going to say, I'd love to hear you read it because you add, like I'm reading as the artist, illustrator, author, but you add such a new layer to it. So anyways.
Pawing through all of the going, where is it?
Well, maybe you could read a little tidbit of something else because
maybe something we haven't heard about yet today.
I'm really I love the way you read, and I'm still learning from you actually.
Oh, you're so sweet. I think that when I'm looking at a book and it's someone who isn't the author reading it, we're trying to interpret and create that moment of interpretation together with the audience. So I'm very much about interacting, and you know this from Rebecca's. I love to stop and say, yes. Oh, like, what do you see there? Like, I believe in interaction and stopping because I think that's really important. When it's joyful, first of all, but it's also a moment for the neurons to fire in the brain and for all of that recognition, for recognition to happen and and it just kind of re-energizes your connection to the story. And the listener then is becoming much more connected to the story.
It's funny. Everything you say is so true, Sonia. And in education, we call that the transactional, the dialogic, or the literally interactive read aloud. And all of those, they're different iterations, but all of those are ways of building dendrites and connections and other things. And it's so incredibly important in the pacing. And I love, Rebecca, how you talk about the fact that there are these other interpretations that you're literally hearing. Somebody is reading your words, but you are hearing those in the interactions that somebody shares. And so I think we are running in the last few minutes or whatever, and I am going to see if this is going to work. We don't know that this is going to work, but I'm going to see if I can share my screen because we put together not a totally comprehensive list, but just some of our, like, some read alouds we really like and other things. So I'm going to see if by chance this is going to work. And I think that Erica's going to key me in whether or not this is working or not. And so we have
it's working. It's working.
Okay. If you remind everybody that Rebecca's on Instagram and Twitter as our Jordan-Glum, Emily's there is Emily Feinberg, Sonia, you can find Warwick Books and other things. These are the two books that Rebecca has created that we're so dynamically excited about for their dialogic and interactive possibilities. Here are some other picture books that we think that have been published or are about to be published that we think make really good read alouds. Here are my favorite read alouds of the moment. I say that because they could change in a moment's notice as I'm adding things and looking at them. And here are some books that Sonia really, really likes, some of which she shared and other things like that. And we just want to remind you that the perfect read aloud is the perfect read aloud for some kids under some circumstances at some moment. In other words, not all books work for all kids all the time. And we also want to just really have a quick shout out and remind you all that publishers were so incredibly generous during COVID in permitting people to record read alouds and other things, some of which are still available, and that there are platforms that make read alouds really available and other things like that. And we're hoping that you will engage in the conversation with us. And as Erica said earlier, these videos of not only this presentation, but previous presentations, of which there are many and they're fabulous, I recommend all of them, are available on stimolalive.com and on YouTube. And if you are here, you'll be able to access those. So I'm just going back to that.
Thank you. Can I read a part of Kitty that I love?
Yes, please.
I can't resist. Okay, hold on. I can't resist. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna bring you all to my favorite page. Okay, hold on. You can say. Okay. Granny spent the rest of the day trying to keep Kitty out of trouble, which wasn't easy. No. Look, Kitty's on top of the Trouble of Penguins, which is, I love that.
See, look at that. A little metafiction, people.
There's a lot in that book.
Yeah.
The world of Rebecca Jordan.
We love that little metafiction, and we love that metafiction potential.
I challenge people to count the eggs in the book.
Yeah. Oh
in
my
all
God.
their many forms.
And that's what kids love. Night
so we love all these. I personally, one of the things I love, which happens both on the dust jacket and on the case cover, is we have the front of our Mischief Maker, and we have,
oh my God.
And
I've never seen that. I never saw it. How is that possible? That's embarrassing.
But it is a surprise for you.
It's totally different places on the dust jacket and on the case cover. See, every detail matters.
It does. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Night fell. Granny went to bed. I want that wallpaper, and I want it now. Crunch, nibble, wheeze, squish, thunk, crash, whoosh. Kitty did not. It's just...
I remember when that art came in. I was like blown away by
it's just too much. Wait, look at Kitty exercise.
Oh so good.
I was crying all night trying to solve that. It was so hard to make it not just look like chaos.
Well, because we kept going back and forth, and I was like, more chaos, more chaos.
Yes.
And this is my favorite spread.
Susannah, I don't think we can thank the publishers enough for all of the permissions to read during the pandemic that have been, many of them extended, because it's a whole way, like just you sharing that little bit of the book right now. It just is such a way to engage people and get them excited about the book. I just hope that we
totally agree with you, Sonia. And it was a legal game changer.
Absolutely,
it was such a legal game changer. As somebody, I got to help a little bit behind the scenes on that early stuff, and it really has made a difference. And the fact that publishers care about every aspect of the story is so incredibly wonderful, and how everybody came together to work in so many different venues and platforms. No,
it's complicated, right? Because though it's like, you always think, well, people are going to still want the physical book, but we are still getting requests. I get requests all the time to read aloud and put up on YouTube, or read aloud and put up for just the classroom. And it's hard now because it's like, yes, you want the book to be shared and enjoyed, but also you don't want educators to be relying on read alouds and not buying the books, right?
It's also super complicated. Because the research is really clear. The kids most benefit from a human interaction in reading, actually. And the research that Dr. Pat Kuhl and others have done is really clear that the human interaction, which Sonia, all of you have talked a little bit about the human and the animal interaction. It's super, super important. So we really want that. That's first. But we also have to remember, Erica, that a lot of digital sharing did drive some print sales.
Yes, it's true.
It has, and particularly with picture books and young adult books, it actually can often increase the sales. So we love the way books smell and the die cuts and all the things that we can do with them. And there is, I sit here like freaking out anytime somebody talks about a book that I don't have a physical copy of, but yet I can't have a physical copy. Like Sonia's doing the same thing.
I know.
Oh yeah.
And Emily went back to get her Elijah Cooper book and other.
I also wanted to plug this book.
Oh yeah, wait! I'm super excited about that book.
Yes, this is also a very good read aloud.
Amazing book.
Which is why I went to go get it when we were talking about the 2-page spread, and I Talk Like a River, because this has a really nice reveal.
Well, the other thing about both of those books is they're heavily reliant on dark colors, and there used to be this thing in the picture book making, and that is that it had to be bright and colorful and cheerful, and so like we saw a lot of yellows and oranges and other things, and now we realize that life is more complicated, and a book works when it works. It works when it works, regardless of what the color the color scheme is, and it's okay to be a little dark and eerie and chaotic in picture book making. So it's 6:01, and yes. Erica's going to kick us off any second now, and I'm checking in the comments. We have lots of fun comments and other things, but it didn't seem like we have any questions. But Sonia's going to talk about books. She recently had an event with two of our favorites, Minley and Dan Santat, and I believe there are signed copies of these books available at Warwick's. Go for it, Sonia.
Well, we were just going to talk about how the pleasure of a read aloud and having the physical book when you get a signed copy. So if you get something that Rebecca has signed, that becomes all that more special. That book then becomes something more than just the story. You own that. You feel like you own it because you're
connected.
Yeah, you're connected to it, and you have Rebecca's signature, and Kitty makes you suddenly feel like you're got, oh, what are you holding there?
My very first signed book that I got in college, I waited in line to get this book. And I was like 20 maybe. Oh my gosh.
Awesome. Absolutely. It makes such a big difference. And it's part of that reading aloud is developing pleasure, and which you connect them with reading. And then that becomes something that enhances their own individual reading. They're going to always think of reading as something as a pleasurable thing. So getting that,
and if you have the opportunity to bring your child. My older son Caleb, who just turned 11, really loves the Mutts comics by Patrick McDonnell, and he was speaking at Mocha Fest here in New York City, and we went and he listened to him speak, which was like such an adult thing to do, and then stood in line and walked up to him, and I was only so sad for him because they had masks. And so it's already so hard to talk to an author illustrator, to talk to somebody like a bookmaker whose books you love. But then to have the masks makes it even harder because you can't get a sense of but whatever, masks save lives. So he got his signed copy and he just loves it. It's a very special opportunity for anybody who's interested in how to increase children's passion about reading or books. This is one really wonderful way. Just find one book that they love and try to get them a signed copy or to bring them to when that author illustrator is speaking.
And there's so many opportunities. There are free book festivals. We are moving back into having some of those around the country, whether it's the National Book Festival in DC or the Rhode Island Festival of Children's Book or the Warwick Festival, not associated with Warwick's, but in actually Warwick's, New York, or the Los Angeles and other things. And also, it's really easy to find if your child has a book or an author and or illustrator he, she, or they loves, just literally find out where those people they live if they're on tour, but the simple Google search, and you might find out that Jeff Kinney's bookstore on Unlikely Story has signed copies, or Warwick's, or Books of Wonder, or High Five Books, or all the various independent bookstores, because by the time I die, I will have gone to every independent bookstore in this country.
Sorry, you just mentioned Jeff Kinney, and I know we have to go. Can I just tell you guys a very funny story?
Yes.
I hope it's not funny. I was at BEA maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, and there was a line of kids and like people, adults, kids, everyone, and it was like going to Jeff Kinney. He was signing books, and so we like kind of got online. We're like, oh yeah, let's see if it wasn't Jeff Kinney. He was signing next to this. This was for Grumpy Cat.
I had that book, by the way.
Like,
of course you did.
There was a line around the corner.
Yeah,
for Grumpy Cat. And there were two people in line for Jeff Kinney.
Oh my gosh.
So funny.
I would have been in that line, just saying. I love Grumpy Cat.
I think I still have the I'm Grumpy Cap. I went to ALA. You didn't miss anything. Postcards.
That's funny.
All right. I want to thank everybody. Thank Erica and Small Alive, because I have to say, as a person who used to see everybody in person, the Small Alives have been such a wonderful way to connect with people I know and people I don't know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rebecca, for making such enthusiastic, eclectic, mischievous, picture books. We hope to see more of your books. You know, two is not enough, you know, so we want to see more. We're looking for the third and fourth. Emily, thanks for your whole body of works. I think too often editors don't get the credit they deserve.
Agreed. Emily, this book, neither of my books would be what they are without her at all. She is such a huge part of it, not just correcting like spelling, you know,
I'm definitely not the person to correct
creating the story, and so much of that goes to Emily. So if you like my books, you love Emily's editing.
Perfect. And Sonia, thank you so much. I can't believe we haven't like crossed paths and like.
No, I feel like I already know you.
Yeah, I feel like we have crossed paths. We just didn't know it, and other things like that. But thank you so much, because that hand selling and that enthusiasm and knowledge that a bookseller has is so incredibly important for helping connecting with parents, guardians, teachers, children's bookmakers, and other things like that. So this has been a delightful hour and 7 minutes. And
Sonia, thank you. And Susannah, thank you so much too, because like I said, your energy is infectious, and I know we could probably talk for hours.
And you're so wise.
Yes, so wise. And
you're very, very silly. You're all very silly. I look forward to seeing you all in person. May everybody literally be safe, healthy, and may there be a great literary moment in your today, in your tomorrow, and in your future. And may I just remind you that there's so many ways that you can take a selfie in a shelfie. We want to see your shelfies, because we want to know what you're reading and what you love. So thank you once again. I hope to see you virtually or maybe in person soon. Take care. And thank you so much, Erica and Samoa Live again, for hosting us.
Well, it was wonderful, and I'm gonna ask the participants to don't log out, because I will just say a quick goodbye ourselves after I turn off everything. And thank you, all of you who joined us today. If you did not subscribe to the channel yet, please do. You can subscribe below to Samoa Live, and you can subscribe on the newsletter, samoalive.com. And I put in the chat how you can purchase Kitty if you would like to from Warwick's, which is the place to go.
And also, Erica, aren't there 2 more Samoa Lives on the books?
There are. Oh my gosh, there's many more, but 2 that I've already teased out. One is March 25th. I will be with Juliana Perdomo for
I love this book.
Sometimes All I Need Is Me, which was published in both English and Spanish. And she'll be reading it with her son. They'll be going back and forth in the English and Spanish. And we'll be celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month. So Juliana is an art therapist as well. And she'll be taking us through sort of like a self-reliance activity to sort of re-ground us in the fact, to remind us that we have what we need inside, mostly. And it's a beautiful book. And then in June, we'll be meeting with Dorothea Roner, who did a book called Twins, with her editor-publisher, Frances Gilbert, and her agent, Allison Remchek. And they'll be talking about how a book actually comes to be. What is the story of the making of a picture book? And so keep joining us. There's more stuff happening besides that, but that is what I am telling you about so far. And if you want to know the others, you can subscribe to the newsletter, or you can follow us on our social media. Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Bye.